consciousness when you look at it from the perspective of the working class as a whole. The working class in all the sectors are exploited to the same degree. They're exploited at the same rate of surplus value, and yet as a corollary of the equalization of the rate of profit, it appears as though workers are more productive in some sectors than others. I'm now on the towards the end. I've got two smaller sections to go. I'm going to contrast the approach that the interpretation that I'm arguing for with two recent contributions in the literature, and then I'm going to point to how I think the discussion can move forward. Now, this Gert Rutten is one of the specialist Marxists working in this field. He basically collapses the distinction between the rate of surplus value and the rate of profit. He argues that workers in the high organic composition sectors are enhanced laborers, and that they do produce more surplus value than workers in the low organic composition sector, capitals do. In other words, he doesn't accept that there is a difference between the profit and the surplus value per sector. If there is a higher profit if there is the same profit in different sectors but fewer workers in different sectors, then it must be that those workers produce more profit. It must be they produce more surplus value. And as I think I'll try to show, there is one level that's almost understandable why this false consciousness can emerge, but what's happening is that this false consciousness is now being theorized and argued in terms of a Marxist solution, which is clearly, in my view, sub-Marx. What it actually does is it confuses the profit with the surplus value as the essence. There is an interesting follow-on to this. I'll just quickly try to explain these diagrams. So this diagram I hope you're becoming familiar with. This is the constant capital, this is the variable capital, which are used up in the production of the commodities. So this is the commodity value, this is the recreated constant capital, this is the created new value, and the gradient here represents the rate of surplus value. Now we can also impose on top of this diagram, the diagram showing the rate of profit. So the rate of profit, constant rate of profit, is directly proportional to the amount invested. So we can just put it as a triangle to show that. So if you increase the amount invested in the production process and passing over to the commodities, then you're going to increase the profit but not change the rate of profit. What Rutten does is he ascribes this increase to an increase in the rate of surplus value, when it's not due to that at all. It's simply because the constant capital has increased in relation to the variable capital. So this is the low organic composition of capital sector. This is the high organic composition of capital sector. So he's misplacing the source of the extra profit. So the source of the higher profit per worker, I should say. That's a better way of putting it. He's saying that the higher profit per worker comes from higher surplus value per worker. Now, Chris Arthur makes a very interesting commentary on Rutten. Chris Arthur is supporting Rutten's analysis, and he basically says, and this we can reinforce this by drawing the distinction between new value created and the value recreated. But as soon as one looks at this, actually, this commentary disproves rather than proves Rutten's solution. Because if you're looking at different organic composition of capital sectors with the same rate of surplus value, these two triangles are meant to look the same. The difference is in how much constant capital is being recreated in the commodity value. And so in the high organic composition of capital sector, much more value is being recreated by the employment of labor, but the same new value is being created. So you can see the proportions are quite different. So in this limited sense, the labor in the high organic composition capital sector is more productive. It is able to recreate more value while at the same time creating the same amount of new value. So its productivity lies here rather than here. And this in turn is an extremely interesting reflection on the nature of value creation and value recreation. And looking back to Volume 1 of Capital, it does put new light onto the distinction between abstract labour and concrete labour, which Marx does refer to, and then sort of like leaves hanging, but we can tie it back to that as well. So that's the Reuten explanation. I'm going to deal with one more explanation very quickly. Then Fine and Alfredo Sarfilo, very mature, well-informed, cautious, I would say, exposition of Marx's solution. And what they do is they concentrate almost entirely, they're aware of the other factor of turnover, but they concentrate in terms of a forward dynamic in terms of the organic composition of capital. But of course, what they miss then, and they do, to be fair to them, emphasize the connection between the formation of the rate of profit and the general tendency of the rate of profit to fall. But completely related to the rising organic composition of capital as the, if you like, the source of dynamic. So what they miss is the other line, you know, they go even further than Marx in missing out the differences in the rate of surplus value, where Marx explicitly denies he's going to include it in his analysis. They kind of like don't even mention it hardly at all. So it disappears from view, the different rates of surplus value. And both Reuten and Fine-Sarfilo, in my opinion, you know, correspond to a certain positionality in terms of understanding the dynamics of the transformation. And so I think a fuller solution should fill in the gap. I mean, we should look at how the rates of surplus value will change according to different conditions and what effect that will have in the formation of the general rate of profit. There's also points which I'll come on to next time, or maybe time after next, which to do with the feedback loop in terms of the later parts of capital as well, which are actually quite important. And Marx has mentioned these in passing. I think it's purely a matter of editorship, really, that they're not more explicit in the current text. So I'm now coming to my point of summarizing what I think I've been arguing, right? Chapter 9 in Volume 3 is incomplete as a solution. I think it should be read as equivalent to simple reproduction. If you remember in Volume 1, Marx looks at simple reproduction, the circularity of capitalist reproduction, before he develops it as extended reproduction or expanded reproduction. And I think that what we've got here is something quite similar. It's not exactly the same, but it's a similar sort of point. It's like a first working prototype of how values can be transformed into prices of production, how surplus value can be transformed into surplus value can be transformed into profit. But it is not the developed solution, and it's sort of like pointing the way to a developed solution once we've gone past the limitations of the first initial solution to the problem. So I'm really laboring this point, but I do think it's significant to fully significant, right? The transformation of the rate of surplus value to the rate of profit at a systemic level must take account of all the variables as premised. That is, distinct rates of surplus value as well as differentiation of the organic composition of capital. That's in a way the bottom line. And that's what comes next. How does the capitalist system move from capitals with a sector average rate of profit to a general rate of profit across sectors when these sectors have different compositions of capital and different rates of surplus value? there's one final point, which is just linking to my arrows to the right of the previous diagram. The transition of commodity's simple value to its price of production requires multiple modifications, some of which are the movement from internal to external, which one would call the externalization of the essence into its actual appearance. And I argue that this requires a differential realization of surplus value. And some of the full solution is kind of like after that, which is there are external actualizations of the rate of profit as well. And so one is redistribution and one is differential realization. I will explain that, okay? But in order to understand these, we can't just look at commodity markets. We have to look at the way capital markets work as well. And so, of course, this is now, I hope, pretty clear. The transformation problem has to be rethought and rearticulated in terms of the contradictions in the formation of the general rate of profit under international relations of capitalism concerning capital's access to the land on the one hand and to oppressed labour on the other. Thank you very much for listening. Time's gone on, but I hope it was worth it. Thanks very much.